Hello, Archie Dunlop here with Talking Astrology with Archie on Monday, March the 31st, 2025. As always, I'm going to be looking at the astrology and the I Ching for today, which is the last day of March, Monday the 31st. I also want to have a brief foray into sidereal astrology. This is the astrology of the constellations, where you supposedly make some allowance for the constellations. And, in particular, I want to point out that Saturn is moving into Pisces. In fact, on Saturday, Saturn moved out of Aquarius and into Pisces. From a sidereal perspective, if we look at things using the Ayanamsha that is most used in Vedic astrology, the Lari Ayanamsha. So it's a big change, Saturn moving out of Aquarius into Pisces from a sidereal perspective. And later in the video, I want to consider this, and I want to look at a few charts, and I also want to look at this thing in Indian astrology called Sade Sati, which is when Saturn conjuncts your moon. It's more complex than that, but I'll be going into this later in the video. But first of all, I want to consider the astrology and the I Ching for today, March the 31st. If you do happen to enjoy this video, I'd be very grateful if you were to like it. If you're not subscribed, do feel free to subscribe. So here are the planets for today, Monday, March the 31st. And the moon is at 12 degrees Taurus. So for all of us, moon is well placed in Taurus. The moon is exalted in this sign, and it's a reminder that the immediate impact of the new moon, Saturday's new moon, is over. The moon and the sun and the moon are no longer in the same sign. So, I've been saying, with the new moon, that you should ideally at the beginning keep things secret, But now that the sun and the moon are in different signs, there's a little more objectivity, and perhaps we can be more open. And now this new lunar phase is well and truly underway. And so, moon in Taurus, it's a day where most of us should feel sort of an enhanced level of security, at least in a relative sense. Moon in Aries just after that new moon could have been a little bit delicate, but with moon in Taurus, we perhaps have an opportunity to stabilize things. And, if something hasn't been sorted out, maybe that's something we can do. And the moon moving out of Aries, perhaps there's less pressure to take action. We don't have to always be taking the initiative. We can slowly build things up. That's the way Taurus likes to work. Now, the moon, when it moved into Taurus, did make a square to Pluto. So at the beginning of the day, there's a sort of moon-Pluto feel there. I mean, we still get it to a certain extent. Pluto in Aquarius, moon in Taurus, that creates a certain dynamic tension. And some of us may feel there are things that we're really holding on to, moon square Pluto, but we might be a little bit obsessed about. Now, there's nothing wrong with being obsessed, provided we're obsessed about the right things. Some things really are important, and they should not be compromised. But other things, it may be a time where maybe we should consider letting go. There's nothing wrong with letting go sometimes. And aside from that, there aren't actually very many aspects today. Venus is conjunct the North Node. So Venus conjunct the North Node Okay, Venus might be retrograde, but Venus and the North Node, in their own ways, are 2 points which are connected with relationships. The North Node is about contacts. Venus is, of course, a planet of relationships. We've got Venus conjunct the North Node in Pisces, so it may be a good time to be trying to get on better with people, trying to relate. It's not that we have to do anything dramatic. We just have to, be there, be sociable if we have the opportunity, and almost in quite a passive way we can make new contacts, and we can get closer to people, yes, and also we don't have to shout, and we can just be accepted for who we are with Venus conjunct the North Node. And indeed, that is the way forward. When you see the North Node, you're saying, well, that's where we should be going. North Node in Pisces, this is the right direction for us. And so we're doing the right thing if we are trying to be with people. The South Node is in Virgo, and Venus is challenging us. So if there's a choice, do we do something alone or do we do it with others? Then possibly, on balance, all things being equal, we should choose the sociable option, because that's the right thing to be doing. We shouldn't be alone if possible, and it might also be about sort of sharing. Sometimes we just want to hold things back, and that might have been the right thing to do over the weekend, with the new moon. And it's the new moon. Things were a bit delicate, but now the moon is in Taurus, so Venus is conjunct the North Node. We should have a more inclusive view of the world. So that's what's happening. You can see that there's not a great deal going on, and in fact there's surprisingly little going on. And if you look at things from the viewpoint of Sydney, Australia, at noon in Sydney the moon is at 2 degrees Taurus. So if you are in Australasia, then right at the beginning of the day the moon will actually be in Aries, and at noon the moon will be very close to that square to Pluto. So I rather underemphasized the moon-Pluto square when I was talking about it from a New York perspective. I said it was separating, but if you're in Australia or New Zealand, that moon square Pluto is probably the main aspect of the day. And that moon-Pluto square, if you are in Australasia, may be about things that you regard as being really important, really worth holding on to. Holding on to for dear life. Well, perhaps that could happen, but don't exaggerate, and don't be too obsessed. Then there is the heliocentric view. So this is the heliocentric picture with the sun at the center of the solar system, where of course it actually is, and there is a Mercury-Mars sextile. And that Mercury-Mars sextile is probably quite important, especially as we don't have very many geocentric aspects. So Mercury-Mars sextile is indicating that there is always a way of telling people how we feel, and we can be assertive about it, but not so assertive that we cause trouble. And we can actually be quite subtle about it, because Neptune is involved. So Neptune is at 29 Pisces. So I know that I think it's today Neptune moves into. It was Sunday. Yesterday, Neptune moved into Aries, And a lot of us are still getting used to Neptune being in Aries from a geocentric point of view. But from a heliocentric point of view, Neptune has not moved into Aries yet. It's still at 2941 Pisces. And so Neptune is at 29 Pisces, is on the Mercury-Mars midpoint. And that means that there are ways to be assertive and to get people to listen to us, which are quite subtle. And we shouldn't be in too much of a hurry to sort of shoot our mouths off with Neptune on a Mercury-Mars midpoint, because we might act too quickly without really knowing without really knowing what we're doing. We could just get confused. And so words can be a useful weapon, but they have to be used very carefully. And now it's time to look at things from the viewpoint of 12 signs. I'm not convinced that there's very much to say today, but I will try my best to give a full picture. So here are my forecasts for today, Monday, March the 31st, 2025. Aries, you are now experiencing Neptune in Aries. It's possibly the first full day with Neptune in Aries, and I wonder what that means. Bismarck was an Aries, actually. Bismarck, that famous German chancellor, the 1860s, 1870s, brought together the unification of Germany and sort of defeated the French in the Franco-Prussian War. A real German, and was incredibly successful. He understood politics, and he understood how to dominate the European continent, or at least to start the process of German domination. Now, why am I talking about Bismarck now? Well, he was an Aries, and you could say that he was at his peak when he really made things happen when Neptune is in Aries. So if you are an Aries, perhaps you should think of Bismarck and not be too worried about Neptune moving into your sign. It might actually mean, Neptune moving into Aries, that you are at one with the universe, that the way you are is correct. Aries sometimes gets criticized for being too assertive, for rushing in where angels fear to tread, getting into trouble, making a fool of themselves. But in general, and I'm not talking about necessarily today, but maybe the next 12 years, because Neptune does move back into Pisces, I think in October, but still that's not for long. Then really the next 12, 13 years, I think until 2038, something like that, Neptune is in Aries. And this is your time, you could argue, when you are at one with the cosmos. And if you want to be assertive, if you want to be a leader, I'm not saying that you're going to be able to unify Germany or unify Europe or whatever else you want to do it. I'm not saying you're going to be able to do that, but if you follow the Bismarck approach, you can certainly create unity with a little bit of force, maybe. And so, don't be worried about Neptune moving into Aries. It's good news, though. To begin with, it might be a little disconcerting. Things aren't quite as clear as they used to be, and that will take some getting used to. And as far as the specifics of today is concerned, you've just had a new moon in your sign, and that very much is a new beginning for you, a new lunar cycle. It should work very well for you. But now the moon has moved out of Aries and into Taurus, and that's nothing to worry about. You had an impulse perhaps over the weekend. It might have been something that was a bit difficult to deal with. Do you have what it takes? What do you need to do? And your first instincts were maybe not the right instincts. And with the moon in Taurus, you have a chance to get things in perspective. Settle down, ask yourself whether you've got the resources to see it through. If you haven't got the resources with moon in Taurus, you can get those resources. So, for example, it's not a situation where lack of funds should grind you to a standstill. You maybe don't need the money you think you need. It may not be about money, it just may be about, do you have a pair of pliers? Do you have a saw? Well, I don't know, whatever you're trying to create. The resources are available. You'll know how to get hold of them. And you can be realistic. You may not need everything that you think you need right now in order to get to wherever it is that you want to go. And I think that if you're realistic and if you're calm, then you're going to feel a sort of a growing sense of confidence that you are in the right place at the right time. Taurus, moon is now in your sign. And with the moon in your sign, you are feeling that you've, in a way, arrived to some extent. That you are who you are, and you don't have to struggle, you don't have to fight, and also, you don't have to hide. That might have been a feeling you had over the weekend, that you couldn't reveal everything, and you might have found the new moon to have been a little disconcerting. In Aries, the sign before Taurus, you knew that something was beginning, and you didn't quite know what it was. And now with the moon in Taurus, you're feeling more confident, and additionally, the moon is making a square to Pluto. Now, that square to Pluto may have been exact last night. It could be exact right now, or at least it could, on Monday at around lunchtime, if you're in Australasia. But there is a square relationship between the moon and Pluto, and I think that this moon square Pluto is probably quite healthy for you. Not healthy for everyone, but for you I think it's quite healthy. And it allows you to be dynamic and focused and ever so slightly obsessed. As I discussed earlier, obsession can be a good thing or a bad thing. If we're too obsessed about something, particularly if it's the wrong thing, we can get ourselves into real trouble. But for you, this moon square Pluto, I think will just allow you to decide what's important and to be able to go for it. And once you start moving in a particular direction, then what can stop you? So, you can be ambitious and you can also be optimistic. And I think that in most cases, people are going to respond to you very well. Because one aspect we do have, which works in your favour, is a conjunction between Venus and the North Node. Now, Venus is, of course, your ruler. Now, North Node, traditionally, certainly in Western astrology, is seen to be of the nature of Jupiter, and the South Node is of the nature of Saturn. And when a planet is conjunct with North Node, it gains strength. So Venus might be retrograde, but it's exalted in Pisces and it's conjunct with North Node. So that conjunction with the North Node makes you luckier than usual. And it also gives you social facility. It allows you to get on with pretty much anyone, and you don't have to fight, you don't have to argue, you don't have to bully. You just have to be yourself and try to reach out. People like using that word, reach out. It's not my favourite phrase, reaching out, but it's what you can do with Venus conjunct the North Node. If you reach out to people, it's very likely that your gesture will be reciprocated, because there's just something about you that's calming, relaxing. You appear to be easygoing. I'm not actually saying you are easygoing, because there are some things that you really are very concerned about, even obsessed about, but to a great extent you can hide that. And so Taurus, do make the most of the social environment, because it does matter, and it matters because it's somewhere where you can be very effective. It doesn't matter who you're dealing with within reason. You can make a powerful and a favourable impression. Gemini, there is a conjunction between Venus and the North Node today, and as far as you're concerned, that might be the most important aspect of the day, because that Venus conjunct the North Node is in Pisces, and it's saying something about your ambitions, and also what you're trying to achieve, where you're trying to go to. And with Venus conjunct the North Node, you can do it right. It is, for example, absolutely appropriate at the moment that you are ambitious. Nothing wrong with being ambitious at all if you're a Gemini. And with Venus making the conjunction to the North Node, you will know how to conduct yourself, and you'll know how to present your ambitions, and you can actually come over as being an attractive person who seems to understand what's going on, and you actually come over as being sort of more sympathetic than usual. And also, there are things you can hide. You can hide some of the less pleasant aspects of your personality. That's absolutely possible. And Geminis can think about loads of stuff. And I'm saying that with my sun in Gemini. And Geminis can think about stuff which we just do not want to talk about, which, if people knew what we were thinking about, we'd probably be ostracized. But we can keep those things to ourselves today, no problem. And it will be appreciated. And additionally, Gemini, you're helped now by the fact that Mercury is in Pisces. Now, normally Mercury in Pisces is a problem, because Mercury is in its fall, it's in its detriment, it's in the opposite sign to Virgo. It's a pretty bad sign for Mercury to be in, but Mercury's in mutual reception to Jupiter. And so Mercury and Jupiter give each other strength, being in each other's signs. So that's a further reason why you can really project yourself. But you do it in a Pisces kind of way. You don't have to be direct and to the point. That's unnecessary. You can be more subtle than one normally expects Geminis to be, and you can listen to your feelings, and your feelings are giving you good information, and you'll know how to navigate other people and their sensibilities. And with this Mercury making a mutual reception to Jupiter, it goes without saying that relationships should be able to function pretty well now that you can see that Mercury really is in Pisces, really is in mutual reception to Jupiter. There are always ways of getting on with people, and it could be good for negotiation, for two people who have very different ways of looking at things. They may almost be in conflict, but somehow they have ways of relating, and they just realize that they've got enough common interest to be able to work together. So Gemini, actually, it looks like being a good day. You are sensitive. You don't have to reveal everything. There's a lot you can hide, but I think you'll be very good at hiding things. And your social skills with Venus conjunct the North Node in Pisces are going to be very good. So enjoy your Monday. Cancer, things are looking good, and I don't think that there's going to be a huge amount of pressure on you. You know, the moon is in Taurus, and the moon is not really making any aspects. It is making a square to Pluto, and that square to Pluto may be quite noticeable if you're in Australia or New Zealand. But it is Pluto. Pluto it's an outer planet. It's a generational planet. Not everyone feels that moon square moon square Pluto. But even if you do feel it, it will be quite subtle. And it may just be up to you whether you want to get involved with that aspect. Yeah, moon square Pluto can have a certain obsessive streak. There are things you want to hold on to. That's true, but it's passing. The moon is a fast-moving planet, and moon. By the way, moon is in Taurus. It's exalted in Taurus, and in the main Cancer, you can do what you like, you can go where you like, and you can associate with who you like. And broadly speaking, Cancer, I would have said that your social skills at the moment are good, but I don't think that your hard work to be around. You can just be yourself. People will enjoy your company, and in most cases, there isn't going to be much pressure. Not going to be much pressure for you to do anything. You're not going to really be inclined to pressurize other people unless you're dealing with something that you really are obsessed about. But is that going to be an issue? It depends what you're talking about. It depends where you're going. It depends what you're doing. So that obsession, I think it's optional, but it's there for you if you feel that really do feel that there's something you want to hold on to, then sure, then go for it. One aspect that you might want to consider is Venus conjunct the North Node in Pisces. Venus conjunct the North Node may be saying that you have a few choices about where you go, who you talk to, what you do with your time. And if you have that choice, you should ask yourself, what is going to be most rewarding and what is going to be most enlightening, and where are you going to learn the most, and where are you going to be given a different view. So if you've got that choice, always go for something which, well, not always, but in most cases, you should go for whatever is more expansive, whatever is most likely to improve your knowledge base. And if something is routine and is about something you already know, then maybe you shouldn't waste your time. This is a time, Cancer, where you need to know as much about the world as possible, and you need to take every opportunity to increase your knowledge, and that should be reflected in any choices you make today. The choices could be completely trivial. Do you talk to one person? Do you talk to another person? Do you read one book? Do you read another book? Although I don't think it's really going to be about reading. I think it's more about the social side of things. But if you can keep that in mind, then I think that today should be fine. One other thing, okay, the moon is in Taurus, and the significance of a moon in Taurus it has several significances, but one significance is that over the weekend we had a new moon. And, the new moon can be quite a difficult time because it's so overwhelming. If you're a Cancerian, you've got the sun and the moon conjunct each other. But now that the moon is in Taurus, in a different sign from the sun, it takes some of the immediate pressure off you, and it allows you to get some objectivity and distance. And you might have had plans, ideas, projects that were forming in your head over the weekend. Difficult to know exactly what to do, but you kind of knew it was important. But now that the moon is in Taurus, things are a lot more straightforward. And moon is in an earth sign, and it's now much clearer what you need to do in a material sense. And as I've already said in this piece on Cancer, there's not going to be much opposition today. So you know what needs to be done, and you can just go ahead and do it. Leo, you have got quite a lot to say for yourself. It's not immediately obvious. You might start the day not feeling that there's much that you've got to contribute, but as you wake up, as you get to grips with the pace of the day, you feel that some things just need to be said. And if you speak today, you'll be able to speak with power and conviction, and you should have no problems getting people to listen to you. And it might be because everything is aligned. What's happening on a trivial level is also happening on a cosmic level. And so if you feel that you want to be quite strong in the way you express your opinions, it will be appropriate. And you may, in a strange way, be benefiting from the fact that Neptune has slipped into Aries. So Neptune moving into Aries, okay, it's an outer planet, but it does say something about the times we're living. The times we're living have now changed. You know that. We're not in a Neptune in Pisces world anymore. It's a Neptune in Aries world. And right now the sun is in Aries, and there is a very wide Sun-Neptune conjunction. So if you feel that you want to express yourself in a way that is strong, maybe even that's a bit obnoxious, then maybe you should go ahead. And that's, of course, a reminder that who's a Leo? J.D. Vance, he's a Leo. And J.D., I was thinking about J.D. Vance, and I was noticing that he gets a lot of criticism. Someone was saying, what was it, LBC? There was LBC is a radio station that has its in London. It's really sort of moved to the left over the last few years. It's he's something about someone there was a heading on the video saying the worst diplomat. Is J.D. Vance the worst diplomat? Well, he might have been the worst diplomat while Neptune was in Pisces, but now that Neptune is in Aries, things have changed. In a way, J.D. Vance, as a Leo, he's now in line. He's now aligned with the way things are with Neptune and Aries. It's possibly his time. I mean, of course, I'm not here to talk about politics, and you may not be a fan of J.D. Vance, but here's an example of a Leo who I think will really benefit from Neptune moving into Aries, and you can benefit from Neptune into Aries, moving into Aries, and I think actually you can benefit right now. And with Neptune in Aries, if you feel there's something you want to say, don't worry too much about offending or upsetting people, because it's appropriate. It's the right time times have changed. Neptune's no longer in Pisces. And additionally, today, we've got Moon in Taurus. Moon in Taurus is top of the chart from a Leo viewpoint. It's a sign in a Leo chart that's connected with work, career, ambition. And so if there's something you feel you want to get going on, then now's the time to do it. And it's perhaps about having an idea in the recent past, which was fairly ambitious, might have appeared too ambitious at the time. But now with a Moon in Taurus, you can be realistic, you understand what can be done, and you can get on with it. And the Moon in Taurus, Moon is in an earth sign, and you need a bit of earth, you need a bit of grounding. But Leo, you've now got that grounding. And if there's anything you want to do, and if you want to really make the most of the lunar cycle, the new lunar cycle, which started over the weekend, then don't delay any further. Virgo, it's nice that the Moon is in Taurus. It is a time when there aren't very many planets in earth signs. We've got Uranus in Taurus, but that doesn't really count because it's generational. And with Moon in Taurus, that does provide you with a bit of grounding, and that's what you were kind of looking for. But it's not grounding in a way that is boring. It allows actually you to have ideas and to be ambitious and to be open-minded, but in such a way that makes sense, that is realistic, that is actionable. And if you want to make something happen, even if it's something that seems a little bit far-fetched, you can start to take action. You don't have to do everything at once, but you can start the process. In fact, it's not a good idea to be in a frantic hurry. You do have to listen to your feelings, get a feel for what the world is like and how things have changed, and other people's sensibilities. You always have to take that into consideration. But if you remember from the heliocentric view, I looked at the heliocentric chart earlier in this video, and maybe you weren't looking at that section, but in the heliocentric chart, Mercury is making a sextile to Venus. Sorry, Mars. Right? Yeah, Mercury is making a sextile to Mars. And of course, Mercury is your ruler. And this heliocentric Mercury-Mars sextile gives you the ability to talk, and you can talk with power, with real vitality, and people are going to listen to you. And you don't need to be afraid of causing offense. I mean, you might cause offense, but it doesn't matter in the grand scheme of things, because the key point, Virgo, is that you are listened to. And additionally, don't forget, Mercury is now in Pisces, so it just moved out of Aries into Pisces, and so with Mercury in Pisces, it's in mutual reception to Jupiter, and with Mercury in mutual reception to Jupiter, in a social sense, you can muddle through. Yeah, you might cause a bit of offence in some places, but you'll get through, and you'll know how to navigate other people's sensibilities. And so relationships could be a little bit unstable, but you'll know how to behave in the end, and yeah, you will get through. And this Mercury being in mutual reception to Jupiter can help you in terms of getting what you want. You can give people a little and maybe take quite a lot. I mean, I know that sounds unfair. I'm not asking you to be unfair, but in any form of negotiation at the moment, if you're clever, you can actually do well out of it, get a lot, and in return giving away as little as possible. I mean, you could try, but I do think that it is likely that if you listen to your feelings, that and of course listen to other people's feelings, that your negotiating skills today could actually be very good. Libra, Venus is your ruler, and today Venus is conjunct the North Node, and that is good. I mean, that sounds a bit basic, but it's just good. Why is it good? Well, if you take William Lilly's point system, I mean, in Christian astrology, he has a table, and you add points for planetary strength. If a planet is conjunct the North Node, it gets +5, and so Venus is exactly conjunct the North Node, so it gains strength, and the North Node is of the nature of Jupiter, and Venus is also in Pisces. It's in the sign of its exaltation. So, Libra, it does seem to me that even though you feel that you're not particularly well placed, in actual fact, things are working well for you, and you are going to be lucky. And all you have to do you just have to do what is right at this moment in time. And with Venus in Pisces, it's important that you are sensitive, but it's also important that everything is done properly. You do things one step at a time. You make sure that everything is in place, and you just make sure you also have to be careful that everything is properly organized, and you don't allow outside factors to hurry you. You don't want hurry. That absolutely not at the moment. You want to be able to take your time and do things in your own way, and it will be appreciated. And it's about you making the decisions and not looking for anything especially dramatic. Don't look for drama. You're looking for order, and by doing that, you will be appreciated. And it also might be appreciated in terms of how you treat other people. Some people's lives are a bit of a mess, and you, in your own way, can give other people clarity. You can allow people to make sense of their own environment and their own ideas about the future, and so that's you, and you do it with a high degree of sensitivity, because Venus is in Pisces. And also, there's no need to reveal too much at the moment, Libra. Absolutely not. The moon is in Taurus. It's not making any aspects, and so just keep it simple. Very simple. And there are things you're going to discover in your own private way, and that's going to put you in a stronger position. And if you do find something out over the course of the day, it's nothing that necessarily has to be discussed. And in fact, today, it's a good time for finding things out about other people. Maybe you're not entirely sure whether or not someone can be trusted, and today you may get information that confirms your suspicions. I mean, that's looking at it from a negative point of view. Or alternatively, you may see the good side to someone's personality. You suspected it was there, but now you see clear evidence. So that's perhaps how Moon in Taurus is working. It's allowing you to slowly observe people and to understand who they are and whether or not you can have them around in your life. So it's a day which is, as I said, it's going to be a good day. It's going to be a lucky day with Venus conjunct the North Node, but it does really have to take place on your terms. Scorpio, Moon is now moving into Taurus, and with the Moon moving into Taurus, inevitably you will have to pay some attention to other people. You'll have to consider what they're doing, what they want, and you can be selfish, but if you are being selfish, you probably need to keep it under wraps. You don't want to publicize your selfishness. That would be unnecessary, and at times you might have to hold back. You want to say something, but you don't, because now is not the right time. And just because there are people around and people you have to interact with doesn't mean that you have to take it too seriously. You shouldn't feel that your freedom is being taken away from you just because you have to spend time with other people, just because you have to listen to them. That's not the case. It's just about getting the balance right. And the Moon, while it's moving through Taurus, it doesn't really make many aspects. So that suggests to me that yes, people are important. Yes, people have to be taken into account, but I don't think there's going to be a huge amount of pressure. And if you want to do your own thing, and if you want to work things out in your own way, then you certainly can. And so don't hit the roof if someone asks you to do something. And also, have a certain amount of confidence in your own powers of persuasion, because heliocentrically we have a sextile aspect between Mercury and Mars, and Mercury and Mars are two planets which are about strong communication as a pair, and you can communicate strongly, but you have to communicate subtly as well, because if you remember from the heliocentric view, in fact, let's just go back to that heliocentric view. So let me just show you what I mean. Let's go to the. Okay, so remember here we have a Mercury-Mars sextile, yeah, and we see that Neptune is opposition the Mercury-Mars midpoint. So with that Mercury-Mars sextile, Scorpio, you are able to communicate powerfully and effectively, but it is moderated by Neptune, and that Neptune moderation is asking you to be subtle, to be sensitive, and to listen very carefully, not just with your ears, but with your heart as well. And that way you can negotiate the situation. You can negotiate other people. You'll be able to know what to say and how to say it. And you might also get some insights into other people's thoughts and feelings, maybe in an almost sort of telepathic way. And if you understand another person's priorities and even another person's obsessions. Remember, there is a square between the Moon and Pluto today. Or it might have been yesterday. It depends on your time zone. But if you can understand another person's obsessions, the things that are really important to them, then you can tailor your message and people are going to really want to listen to you. So that Mercury-Mars sextile, heliocentric sextile, is available to you, and it's up to you whether you take full advantage of it or not. Sagittarius. Sagittarius, moon is in Taurus, and you could say that with the moon in Taurus, you might want to slow down a bit. Perhaps you're still trying to get a perspective on the new moon. So, we had the new moon over the weekend, and I do think, Sagittarius, it was a very good new moon for you, being in Aries, and hopefully it gave you, a strong sense of what you could do in a creative sense, and also it made you realize that you were an individual. You don't have to follow the crowd, and you've got really something very special to offer. But it's all very well having those insights, but then, what do you actually do about it? And with the moon in Taurus, there is a little bit of realism creeping in. And it's not about rushing here, there, and everywhere. It's about taking things slowly and asking yourself, well, what actually needs to be done? What would you have to do in order to successfully complete the mission? Or indeed to successfully start the mission, because that might be how the new moon feels like. There are things you want to get going on, but where do you start? And with the moon moving into Taurus, you get an idea of what actually is possible, but also you're aware of what might be holding you back. And some Sagittarians do feel at the moment that they're not getting enough support, and it just might feel that you're kind of on your own. Other people should be available for you, but they're not, and they're not being appreciative, maybe, or not appreciative enough, and they're coming up with excuses. So in order to avoid that kind of disappointment, Sagittarius, did I call you Taurus just then? I hope I didn't, but I might have done. If I did, my apologies. So Sagittarius, make sure that you, as far as possible, try to do things not on your own, but not with expectations. Don't assume that anyone is going to help you out. They might be there for you. In a couple of cases, they will be there for you, because Mercury is making a mutual reception to Jupiter, and Mercury's gone back into Pisces, and it's in reception to Jupiter, and that indicates to me that the people who are most trustworthy, who are most likely to come up with the goods today, are the people who you know very well. For example, your family or your close friends. People who you don't know well are the people who are most likely to let you down, I think. But there's no need to feel let down if you just take responsibility, and you're not looking for instant results, and you don't have expectations of other people. If you take that approach, Sagittarius, then things should be fine. Capricorn, the moon is now in Taurus. It's out of Aries. So, when the moon was in Aries, because we had this new moon in Aries, that might have almost rooted you to the spot. But not in a bad way. Sometimes it's good to be rooted to the spot. You just wanted to stay in one place. You wanted to enjoy home and family. That's what the new moon was about. And hopefully you got some insights about your home and where you want to live, how you want to live. And new moons are not one-day wonders. Their impact does last for a couple of weeks. And so you had some thoughts over the weekend. You had some realizations maybe about what it means to be secure, what it means to be happy in your home. And now, with the moon moving out of Aries into Taurus, well, that can have a couple of implications. One implication is that with the moon in Taurus, which is an earth sign, you can start to think about what you can actually practically do to give yourself the security and comfort that you're looking for. Additionally, moon in Taurus, from a Capricorn viewpoint, is really very creative. It can think about possibilities, and I think that you're less cautious than you were over the weekend now with moon in Taurus, because you're just feeling more comfortable, and because you're feeling more comfortable, that might mean that you can take more risks. Of course, I'm not talking about serious risks, but perhaps taking a risk of making a fool of yourself, perhaps embarrassing yourself, going somewhere you've never been before. But you don't take risks for the sake of it. You don't stick your neck out for the sake of it. You're doing it because you want to make the most of everything. And now with the moon in Taurus, this is something that you very much can. Now, talking about risks, I'm not saying that today is entirely risk-free in a physical sense. The probabilities of something going wrong, might be slightly greater than usual. And it's not just today, it's the fact that Saturn is starting to make a sextile to Uranus. And you can see that, look, Saturn's at 24-27 Pisces, and Uranus is at 24-44 Pisces, 24-44 Taurus. So I know it's a sextile. I know that's a fortunate aspect. But as Saturn moves towards that conjunction of, towards that sextile of Uranus, you do have to be a little careful. You don't want to do anything stupid. You don't want to, play around with sharp things which have sharp edges, or explosive devices, or being careful with your car, and careful where you go, how you walk. Just be a little more careful than usual. And you're a Capricorn, though. You are sensible. You have a very good sense of what is dangerous, and I think you can trust that good sense and just listen to yourself. And I don't see you having to deal with dangerous situations, because I think your warning bells will give you an indication that you might be heading into trouble. But I don't want to spoil today. I'm just trying to look at what could go wrong. But in general, today is a day, Capricorn, when you can really be yourself, and you can start to explore ways of making yourself feel comfortable and secure. But also, you can explore ways of making the absolute most of your God-given talents, and that could be what Moon in Taurus is all about. Aquarius, one aspect that I haven't mentioned is a sextile between Saturn and Uranus, and this is creeping up on you. It's not that the Saturn sextile Uranus is exact, but it's getting closer. And there's Saturn at 24-27 24, 27 Pisces at the moment, and it's moving to a sextile of Uranus, which is 24 degrees 44 Taurus. So it's happening, and I probably should tell you when it's going to be exact, just so you know. So that Saturn-Uranus aspect is going to be exact. I think it's on about Friday. So it's soon. So but it's because these two planets are slow moving. Yeah, it's exact on Friday the 4th, and it is likely to have an impact on you. For one thing, Saturn is your ruler, and so it's sextile Uranus. Now, if you are of the opinion that Uranus rules Saturn, but Uranus rules Aquarius. By the way, there's no way, in my opinion, that Uranus does rule Aquarius, but still, I have to respect your opinion if you believe otherwise. I would certainly accept that Uranus has an association with Aquarius, and so that Saturn-Uranus sextile coming up over the next few days is important, and I think it can work in your favour. It can make things more interesting, make things more exciting, though, as I was suggesting to Capricorn just now, it can make you a little bit more accident prone, because Uranus could be the planet of accidents, and a sextile can just represent an easy accident. It just happens quickly, and things just move more quickly than you were expecting. So do take that into consideration, but I'm not trying to frighten you, and I think that Saturn sextile Uranus is probably more of a plus than a minus. It does allow you to really tune into your own individuality in your own way, and you can do something really quite special. And additionally, as far as today is concerned, with the moon in Taurus, it's possibly a time for reflection. You don't have to go out of your way to do anything, because probably all the work can be done right where you are. You don't have to move. The moon is, of course, earlier in the day, or midday if you're in lunchtime, or if you're in Australia or New Zealand, the moon is actually making a square to Pluto, and I think wherever you are, you're going to feel that moon-Pluto square to some extent. And that moon square Pluto is about focus. It can also be about obsession. There are things you want to do, and you know what they are. You don't want to compromise, and if you have that kind of state of mind, you shouldn't really go places. You shouldn't go places where other people are making the rules, and you're probably best off if you just stay where you are, because where you are, things are fine. You're in control. But as soon as you drift away, onto unfamiliar territory, then you're not going to be so confident, and you're not going to be quite so effective, and indeed you might become more accident prone. So it's kind of obvious what you should be doing, and additionally it just aligns with who you are. If you're an Aquarius, you tend to be independent minded. You have your own way of doing things, and in that sense you could say that today is very Aquarian. And as you're an Aquarian, you need to do things how you want to do them, and so don't put yourself in a place or in a situation where you risk being bossed around or told what to do. Pisces, the moon is moving through Taurus, and with the moon moving through Taurus, you may feel that there are places you'd like to go to, and you've got things to say, and that's how you want to lead your life. You little bit of activity, not dramatic activity, and you might be quite hopeful that other people are going to respond to you in a constructive sense, though it's important that you don't have too many expectations. I think there is a danger, Pisces, that some people appear to let you down. They just don't seem to have the zest for life that you do. And they might, for example, be creating lots of objections, objections sort of coming out of nowhere. And you can't see why people are being difficult, but they just are. And you just have to accept that some people have their own issues, and leave them to it, and just wait for the situation to resolve. It's not everyone, because Mercury has gone back into Pisces. I mean, I think it was over the weekend that Mercury moved into Pisces, and so with Mercury in Pisces, that means it's making a mutual reception to Jupiter. So Mercury and Jupiter are in each other's signs. Mercury is in Pisces, a sign ruled by Jupiter. Jupiter's in Gemini, a sign ruled by Mercury. So with this Mercury-Jupiter mutual reception, the right people do relate to you very well and very powerfully, and they will listen to you. But it's a question of quality, not quantity, as far as your social life is concerned. If you try to mix with lots of different people, or you try to talk to different people, most of them are going to disappoint you. Most of them are going to disappoint you. But a couple of people are not going to disappoint you, and you really can trust them and rely on them to be there for you and to honor their promises. Now, one thing I should say, which I didn't say when I did your weekend charts, is that Neptune is out of Pisces. Neptune is now in Aries. Now, Neptune will return to Pisces in the autumn, briefly, but by and large, it's gone after, I think, after the beginning of 2026. Neptune goes back into Aries, and it stays in Aries until, was it 2038 or something like that? So that is a little bit of a change, Neptune in Pisces. I don't know whether you're going to feel it. I don't know whether you're going to feel it straight away, but it might feel as if some long-term confusion has just gone. Something that you thought you didn't understand, something that you were really trying to make sense of but couldn't make sense of it. It's not just gone, but there's a new clarity. Because how do we actually find clarity? Sometimes the way to find clarity is to make things really confusing to begin with, to throw things up in the air. And that's perhaps what's been happening since 2011, 2012. That's when Neptune went into Pisces, and it's been there over a decade, and you've been battling with this. I think when Saturn went into Pisces at the beginning of 2023, it started to make sense, but now there is clarity, and it had to happen. There had to be this period of unclarity when everything was blurred. You couldn't really make sense of anything, and it had to happen. But now you can see things. You can open your eyes, and it's clear. And Saturn is still in Pisces, and that Saturn in Pisces is really clearing things up for you. It's like Saturn in Pisces now is working it's like on your computer. You have this process that tidies up your disk, that removes the unused files. And maybe that's what Saturn in Pisces is actually doing, especially now that Neptune has left your sign. So I think that's all I want to say for the 12 signs. And now I want to look at today from the viewpoint of the I Ching. So I ask the question: what is Monday going to be like for those watching the I Ching section of this video? And the first hexagram I got was hexagram 25, which is the unexpected. And this hexagram is kind of mixed. It's telling us that we shouldn't have expectations. We should just be relaxed and just see what happens. And then we'll be fine. If we try to force the pace, or if we try to second guess things, then our good luck could be blunted. But the trouble with this hexagram is the lines, and not all the moving lines are fortunate. And we do have two moving lines. We have the third line moving, and we have the fifth line moving. And in the I Ching, when you have the third line moving, that can often be unfortunate. And I think we've had this third line moving quite recently, a week or two ago. And this third line is about losing something. It's about having something stolen. And it's not really our fault. We behave according to the rules. We are careful, but we feel we know our neighbours. We feel that we know our neighbourhood. We feel we're not doing anything especially careless, but nonetheless something is taken from us. And I think if you remember, if you've been watching these videos, you remember I've been talking about the symbolism of the cow tethered to your house in a village, and someone takes the cow. It's not your fault, and you were behaving as expected, but some passerby just takes your stuff. And that might mean that you do have to be a little bit careful about theft today. And so that's one thing. Don't walk around with an expensive cell phone, or indeed with any cell phone, in a difficult neighborhood. So things just could be taken, or you leave something close to the road and it gets just, someone passes by and just takes it. So that could be one way in which the hexagram is manifested. This line manifests, the third line from the bottom. There's also a possibility of a false accusation here. So going back to that cow being stolen, it may not be your cow being stolen. Someone else steals the cow, but then you get blamed for stealing the cow. Now, I'm sure you're not going to get accused of theft or anything like that, but it might be that you find yourself accused of something, maybe an error or omission, which is completely unfair. And don't worry about it too much. People do make accusations, very gentle accusations perhaps, but still accusations. So don't get too defensive. People do that. It's human nature. If something goes wrong, they want to blame someone, and maybe it's you they'll decide to blame. But don't take it to heart. And we get to the fifth line, and the fifth line moving is kind of interesting. It's talking about sickness, but it's also saying that if you have not done anything wrong, if it's not your fault, if it's someone else's fault, then the problem will resolve itself of its own accord without needing medicine. So if you feel that something's not right and you feel that it's not your fault, I mean, maybe it's like being accused of something, whatever it is, don't be over dramatic. Don't feel that you have to do anything, that you have to get advice, legal advice. I mean, that's a bit extreme, but whatever it is, dramatic measures are probably not called for. That may also be about health. So I don't want to really give specific medical advice here, but let's take a let's take a relatively trivial example, having a headache, for example. So if you have a headache, your inclination, at least my inclination, is to, in America they call it Tylenol, in the UK they call it paracetamol. You feel you want to, you don't want to put up with this headache, so you just want it to go away, and you take the paracetamol or the Tylenol, and you almost, of course, the moment you consume these things, the headache starts to go away, because it's often a psychosomatic thing. And that's the indication there, is if you are wondering whether or not to take medicine, and it may be literal medicine, and of course if you're being prescribed medicine, obviously I'm not talking about that, I'm not asking you to break any prescription, but it's more, if you want to opportunistically take medicine because it just to solve a problem and you're wondering whether or not to do it, then perhaps in doubt don't take it, because the pain may work its way through without needing medicine. And the I Ching, one of the translation of the I Ching does actually say that specifically. It says, don't take medicine, because the thing will cure itself of its own, all by itself. But I'm not giving medical advice. I'm talking more about, things like headaches and passing pains that we try to self-medicate for. That's what I'm talking about. And we've got these two moving lines, so that does mean we move to a second hexagram. And the second hexagram is the clinging. And we hear about cows again. It says, look after your cow. And in a previous hexagram, I talked about losing your cow getting stolen. And we're getting the cow coming up again. And that might indicate that if you've lost something, or even if you feel something has been stolen, in the end, you will get it back. And the clinging is holding on to what is yours and looking after it. And also, this hexagram is about the sun rising twice, because we've got these fiery trigrams, which kind of are supposed to symbolize the sun, maybe. And it is about being bathed in light. And so after the difficulties of the previous hexagram, the previous hexagram did indicate that things were going wrong a bit. I mean, not badly wrong. We were able to manage the situation without resorting to drastic measures. We were able to get through it. But the clinging means that things return to normal, and more than normal. We hold on to what is ours, and that is an indication that we get things back if we've lost them. And also, we get the recognition we deserve, and sometimes we can lose our reputation or lose recognition, and we can feel that we're being ignored. But by the end of the day, with 30, the clinging, we're in the spotlight, and we can feel pretty good about ourselves. And now I want to talk about sidereal astrology and the fact that the Saturn is moving into Pisces. Now, every now and then I look at the comments on this video on my channel, and every now and then someone will write something like, "You've got it wrong. Your placings of the planets in the signs is totally wrong. You've made no reference to the constellations. The Western astrology, the astrology that we know and love, is complete garbage. And the reason it's complete garbage, because astrology in the West, we get our signs wrong. If you actually look at the constellations, it's something completely different. And we get this. We get this even in the popular press, in the tabloid newspapers. And so it happens that we can, there'll be an article, and I've seen these articles since the early 90s, even the 80s, and it sometimes goes like this, and it goes like saying, well, there is this 13th sign. Remember the 13th sign, Ophiuchus? And modern astrologers have completely ignored the Ophiuchus, and it's kind of somewhere where Scorpio is, and therefore astrology is complete garbage. And sometimes they will have an astronomer pointing this out. Indeed, sometimes an astronomer will try to get into the press by making this observation that Western astrology doesn't line up with the constellations. It's kind of annoying, and it just happened with incredible regularity. Every couple of years, you get a pretty much identical article would come up in the tabloid press, and I think it's reflected sometimes in the comments I get for this channel occasionally. And so I thought in this video I would address this issue, particularly in light of the fact that Saturn has gone into sidereal Pisces. So first of all, what kind of zodiac do we use in Western astrology? Most Western astrologers. And we use a tropical zodiac. I'm sorry if you know this already, but I thought I'd just take this opportunity to just go over it because I haven't done it before, is that we use a tropical zodiac. And 0 degrees Aries, it all starts at 0 degrees Aries, is the point in the sky when the sun crosses the celestial equator at the spring equinox. That point where the sun is exactly at the spring equinox is 0 degrees Aries. In other words, the zodiac that Western astrologers use is seasonal. It has got really nothing to do with the constellations. I mean, that sounds kind of disappointing, but it's the truth. And it's been the truth really for a couple of thousand years. Ptolemy Tetrabiblos advocated for a tropical zodiac, and so that means that when at the summer solstice from a northern hemisphere perspective, at the summer solstice, at the exact point when the sun has reached its highest point, that is 0 degrees Cancer. And the autumnal equinox, that exact point where the sun goes down, crosses the celestial equator, going downwards, that exact point is Libra, is 0 degrees Libra, and then we go down, and then at the winter solstice, from a northern hemisphere perspective, that precise moment where the sun is at its maximum southerly point is that 0 degrees Capricorn. So, as Western astrologers, we use a tropical zodiac, and we don't really pay attention to the constellational positions of the planets. The only thing that is of some interest is at that point when the sun crosses the equator at the autumnal equinox, at that precise point, we can ask ourselves, what constellation is the sun on at that time? And that might give us some idea about the ages, as in the age of Aquarius, the age of Pisces. And that depends how you see the constellations. And so the reason we have this issue is something called the precession of the equinoxes. So approximately, that the sun at the equinox, in terms of the background of the sky, will always be, every 70 years approximately, it will move back 1 degree. And so that's why the tropical signs, the signs that we use, the seasonal signs, are going further and further out of sync with the constellations, and there is this theoretical difference between the tropical zodiac, that we use. Tropical relates to the seasons, and the sidereal zodiac, which is, I think, from a Latin sidereus, which relates to the stars and to the constellations. And that difference is called the Ayanamsha. And that Ayanamsha is growing, and it is approximately 24 degrees. It's around 24 degrees at the moment. Now, if you have the American ephemeris, every month it gives you something called the Senetic Vernal Point, and it says, what the difference is between the two, between the tropical and the sidereal zodiac. And at the moment it says it's for the SVP at the moment it says it's 4 degrees 54 Pisces, and what that means is that if you take the positions of the planets now, so Saturn is, for example, Saturn is around 24, 25 Pisces. If you add 4 degrees 54 to Saturn's position, and that takes you to 0 degrees Aries, and then you take away a sign, then that tells you where Saturn is from a sidereal perspective. And the Senetic Vernal Point is actually a good way to tell us how long we've got before the age of Aquarius starts. So if the Senetic Vernal Point is 4 degrees 54, that means if you divide that through, if precession is taking place at approximately 1 degree is 71 years, something like that. If you divide it through that Senetic Vernal Point, if you use that, I think it was developed by an astrologer called Cyril Fagan, hence the Fagan-Bradley Ayanamsha, then the age of Aquarius will start on AD 2379. I think that's the number. So anyone saying that we're in the age of Aquarius, there's no evidence for that. The age of Aquarius is something mathematical. It's completely technical. It's not about how you feel. This is all very Aquarian. That's not what the age of Aquarius is about. It is mathematical, and it starts at around AD 2379, and that is pretty much a point of fact. Although if you actually use the real constellations, you could argue that the age of Aquarius actually starts much, much later. And so those are a few thoughts about the broad concept of sidereal astrology and tropical astrology. Now, what has happened this weekend is that Saturn has gone into Pisces, and so here is the chart for today using the tropical zodiac, and you can see that Saturn is at 24 degrees 27 Pisces. Now, if we apply the Ayanamsha that is most used in the world, which is the Lari Ayanamsha, the Senetic Vernal Point, by the way, is not based on the Lari Ayanamsha. It's based on the Cyril Fagan, the Fagan-Bradley Ayanamsha. But using the Lari Ayanamsha for today, and we look at the sidereal positions, we see that Saturn is at 0 degrees 14 Pisces. So this is the sidereal position of the planets. And in fact, there is a moment where Saturn went into Pisces, and I think I make it sort of on last Saturday, Saturday the 29th. Saturn went out of Aquarius. Remember, this is sidereal Aquarius, went out of sidereal Aquarius, and it entered Pisces. So what does that mean? Well, what does it mean? I would have said that does say that something is changing. Saturn really is in Pisces now. I mean, some people might have argued that it wasn't in Pisces, but now it is well and truly in Pisces. Now, by the way, in terms of the collective unconscious and trends in society, I do not use the sidereal zodiac. I go with the tropical zodiac because I am a tropical astrologer. But I think it's worth pointing out that Saturn has gone into Pisces from a Vedic perspective, and it has an effect on you depending on your horoscope. And so if you look at my chart, this is my Vedic chart, by the way, this is not my Western chart. Here is my Vedic chart. And my moon is at 29 degrees 3 Pisces. I mean, it's not nice, my moon, from a Vedic viewpoint. Its moon is in the 12th house. I'm using whole sign houses with Alari Ayanamsha here, but I'm using the Western format to set up the chart rather than I'm not going into my Vedic program. And so my moon is Gandanta, and Gandanta is when it's in I think it's the last degree of a water sign, so that's not very fortunate. And even though my moon is right at the end of Pisces, the moment Saturn enters Pisces, sidereal Pisces, even though it's almost a sign away, I get it. The transit to my moon has started. And while Saturn is in sidereal Pisces, my moon is under pressure. Worse still, we have this phenomena called Sade Sati in astrology. And really that's kind of what I want to talk about in the rest of this video. Sade Sati is when Saturn moves into the sign before the moon, the sign the moon is in, and the sign the moon after the moon. So my Sade Sati period started when the moon moved into Aquarius, and the central stage of phase of Sade Sati, when the moon is actually in the same sign as the moon, started for me on Saturday. And there are remedies for Sade Sati. I could pay priests in India to pray for me to somehow mitigate the damage that Sade Sati can cause me. And apparently you can lose everything during Sade Sati. It can be a disaster. Although cynics might say, well, this is a good way for astrologers to make money, because it does mean that for a quarter of the time of all of our lives, we're in a Sade Sati period. Or if you take that the immediate Sade Sati period when Saturn is conjunct your moon, it's still 1/12 of the time. So it can be a problem. And I wanted to just give you an example of Sade Sati not working. So here's Margaret Thatcher's Vedic chart, put in a Western format. And so Margaret Thatcher has moon conjunct Regulus, by the way. But from a Vedic perspective, her moon is at 5 degrees Leo. Now, she became prime minister she was elected, I think the election was March the 3rd, 1979. She became prime minister on March the 4th, 1979, when Saturn was at 13 Aries. So in her case, that immediate period of Sade Sati, when Saturn was crossing her moon, coincided with her becoming British Prime Minister. So I wanted to show you that, just to illustrate that Sade Sati needn't be such a bad thing. And I just want to look at a couple of people in the news who are about to experience that central stage of Sade Sati, when Saturn is in the same sign as their moon, when they've got some people who've got moon in Pisces. In other words, people who have just moved into Sade Sati over the last couple of days. And if you are interested in France or French politics, the French left-wing sort of opposition, one of the opponents of Macron. Jean-Luc Mélenchon has his moon at 1 degree. Remember, this is a sidereal chart. I'm using a Vedic sign placements, not the Western sign placements. Jean-Luc Mélenchon has his sidereal moon at 1 degree 52 Pisces, because it's a French birth. French births tend to be accurately timed, and so Saturn is just crossing his moon. In fact, he's got a Saturn transit as well, using tropical astrology, but he's moving into the central stage of his Sade Sati period. So this might mean, if Sade Sati works, that he could now start to be under a lot of pressure, and it may be difficult for him to get results politically, though we shouldn't forget that Margaret Thatcher became Prime Minister during her Sade Sati period. And moving to the other side of the Atlantic, Justin Trudeau. So Justin Trudeau has his moon his sidereal moon at 23 Pisces. So even though Saturn is a long way from his moon, having gone into Pisces, it does mean that Justin Trudeau is now moving into his Sade Sati period. Now, this probably makes more sense because he's just given up the premiership to Mark Carney. It's going to be an election, but now that he's in his Sade Sati period, and we already know he's no longer Prime Minister, so kind of opposite situation than with Margaret Thatcher, there could be all sorts of problems for him. And in his Vedic chart, he's got the moon in the 8th house, he's got Mars in the 8th house. So I think that Saturn is going to cause him a lot of problems anyway. But yes, I think with this central period of Sade Sati, it may not be an especially lucky period for Justin Trudeau, though he is no longer Prime Minister, he's no longer playing a central role in Canadian politics. It may say something about his personal life, his relationships. It could be about scandal. Who knows? But we'll see. But so he's someone who might be pressurized by it. And in the United States, we had this signal leak. That was certainly embarrassing. Trump is not going to sack anyone. I mean, I think Trump realizes that if he sacks people, he's just giving his enemies material. And Pete Hegseth, the defense secretary, has got his moon at, again, these are all sidereal charts, has got his moon at 5 degrees Pisces. So Pete Hegseth is now moving into the central period of his Sade Sati period. Now, he may, of course, be an example of someone who seems to be benefiting from Sade Sati, because there are 3 stages of Sade Sati: the early stage and the late stage and the central stage. So he became defense secretary during the early stage of Sade Sati, when Saturn was just before the moon, and and that's when he became defense secretary. He got confirmed in Congress, so you could say that things are okay. But there has been a signal leak, and he is defense secretary. That is a difficult position. I suspect with Pete Hegseth, given some of the issues that the regime is going to have to face, it's going to require a lot of subtlety. I think that it's not going to be easy for Pete Hegseth now with the Sade Sati, and I wouldn't be surprised if Sade Sati works badly for him. But again, we mustn't forget the Margaret Thatcher example, but I think he does have to watch out. Pete Hegseth really does. Politics aside, someone I know absolutely nothing about is Kim Kardashian, but she does have her moon at 4 Pisces, so Kim Kardashian is about to enter the Sade Sati period. But Kim Kardashian is rich enough to pay for priests, isn't she, to sort everything out for her. And finally, there is Sam Bankman-Fried, who's in prison after the FTX blow up, and he has got the moon and Mercury in Pisces. And so again, Sidereal Pisces, and so he is moving into the Sade Sati period, and if he's in a federal prison, he's continuing to look at a very long prison sentence. I think during his Sade Sati period, this is a time when people need to look after him. I mean, he may have done bad stuff, but I think his mental health needs to be attended to. Maybe, I mean, it must be really difficult, and so those responsible for him need to make sure he's okay with this Sade Sati period happening. Maybe Trump will give him a pardon, but I'm not convinced. So do consider Sade Sati in Vedic astrology. It is quite important, and I think we should also take note of the fact that Saturn has changed sign. By the way, another person who might be impacted by Saturn changing sign is Mark Carney. I've already mentioned this, the Prime Minister of Canada. So he is a Pisces. So he's got his sun in Pisces in both zodiacs, but with Saturn moving into Pisces, the central part. His moon is somewhere else, so he's not entering Sade Sati, so that's not really such an issue. But he has got, from a Vedic perspective, he's got Saturn conjunct his sun. Of course, he's got Saturn conjunct his sun from a Western perspective as well, but we get a double dose of it. And the sun, I think he's in a sun subdasha. So because he's in a sun subdasha, it may be that Saturn moving into Pisces might diminish his luck. I mean, that's a possibility, but as you know, when I looked at his chart recently, I think he's got a very lucky chart. So anyway, I hope you enjoyed this video. Do take into account of the fact that Saturn has just gone into Sidereal Pisces, though, from my perspective, I am a Western astrologer and I use the tropical zodiac, although I am aware that there are different zodiacs, different signs, and I think one should at least take into account the sidereal system. So thanks very much for watching. If you did enjoy this video, I'd be very grateful if you were to like it. If you're not subscribed, I'd be super grateful if you were to subscribe. And if you want to buy me a coffee, there is a link in the description, and I will talk to you again tomorrow.